Part 50. Big fighting at Jinghua Building, then Bai Xuelan killed to Zhou Huo. Xuan Huaifeng took a sigh of relief when he got into the car and stayed away from the Jiangnan restaurant. I was in the wing room for a while, and I felt awkward no matter what I thought. He was a little happy to be scalded, so he could leave first. The driver swung the steering wheel in front of him and asked, "Adjutant Zahn, are we going back to the mansion?" Xuan Huaifeng looked at the sky. It was only lunch. And he didn't know if Bai Xuelan had eaten, and said, "Let's go to the General Administration of Customs. I still have some official business to do." The driver drove on the road to the General Administration of Customs. At the gate of the General Administration of Customs, Xuan Huaifeng got out of the car and went directly to the chief's office upstairs. When he knocked on the door, there was no sound inside for a long time. A member of the staff happened to see it and said, "Adjutant Zahn, are you looking for the chief?" Xuan Huaifeng said, "Yes." The member said, "The chief is out." "You don't know?" Xuan Huaifeng asked, "Did he go to dinner?" The staff member said, "Probably yes. It seems that someone from the police department came over to invite him." And the chief left with a few guards. When they went downstairs, I heard something vaguely said the dishes at Jinghua Building are good. I'm afraid they should go to Jinghua Building for dinner. Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help but notice. Bai Xuelan was shot in an ambush last time, and the police department handled it in an unclear manner. There were rumors that the police chief had colluded with the head of the fire gang. Why did the police department suddenly have a dinner date with Bai Xuelan today? There must be something strange. He felt a little anxious in his heart. This man didn't care too much. He was his adjutant anyway, so he didn't say anything about such a thing. If I knew about this, I would have postponed the appointment with my third brother by a day anyway. Xuan Huaifeng turned around and went downstairs, walked out the door quickly, got into the car with a cat waist, and said to the driver, "Drive, go to Jinghua Building. Hurry up." Bai Xuelan took 2 guards to the room of Jinghua Building. The police chief had already set up a table of wine and food. When he saw him coming in, he stood up and greeted him with a smile. He folded his hands and said, "Brother Bai, you came so quickly. Come here, please take a seat first." Bai Xuelan smiled at him. "Sit down at the table." Song Ren and another guard walked over and stood behind him without looking sideways, as if they were 2 door gods. Bai Xuelan asked, "Brother Zhou, isn't there someone else?" Director Zhou smiled and said, "No hurry. We have already made an appointment, but they haven't arrived yet. It's cool here. We'll wait while we eat." He himself also sat down, took a peanut in his mouth and chewed it with relish, while saying, "Oh, Brother Bai, to be honest, I really admire you about what happened last time." Bai Xuelan smiled and said, "Do you admire me being shot?" Director Zhou said, No, I mean, being shot for the country is an example of serving the country and the people. I admire people like you." Moving towards Bai Xuelan, and thumbs up. Putting down his hands, he sighed again, "But these days, good people don't live long, and disasters are left for thousands of years. It's hard," he said, shaking his head. Bai Xuelan thought for a while, then sighed and said, "Brother Zhou, what do you mean? What do I understand? I was young and feisty. At first, I thought about the 3 fires of the new official's appointment. Now that I think about it, why bother? I lost my life in vain, and I can't say goodbye. Outside, you have probably heard about my reputation. For a little tax, the businessmen hate me half to death. Smoking is prohibited. I was originally for their own good, but those who smoked cigarettes hated me even more. They said that because I stopped their smoking, the price of tobacco soil has increased several times. They used to be able to smoke for 5 days, but now they can only smoke for 1 day. It seems that I forced them to go bankrupt. Yes, Director Zhou echoed. So, if you say that making trouble with the people is difficult, how can they know your painstaking efforts? Bai Xuelan sneered and said, I'm not that stupid anymore. And I don't spend it on these wastes if I have painstaking efforts. If they want to smoke a lot, let them go. They deserve it. The chief can't be blamed for these useless wastes. Director Zhou slapped his palm on the table and said with a sigh of relief, that's exactly what they said. They are willing to degenerate, and we care about their lives? Brother Pai, what are you going to do with the current situation now? Bai Xuelan, after a slight pause, he thought about it and asked, Brother Zhou, what advice do you have? Director Zhou looked at him carefully, seeing that he was indifferent and negotiating, and tentatively said, originally, the matter of your customs, I should never talk too much. But there is one thing that is related to the scope of responsibility of my police department. Bai Xuelan asked, what? Director Zhou smiled and said, Brother Pai, your subordinate at the customs office seems to be a few of them are too impatient. A while ago, did they shut down other people's smokehouses for no reason? This will cause public security disputes. Let our police department also get involved. I think it's the person on your end. When they made a big mess, I specially called someone to mediate, and I managed to suppress it. But if things go on like this, things will always go wrong. Bai Xuelan frowned and said, is there such a thing? Director Zhou said, I see you, it's not like you condone this kind of thing. Bai Xuelan said, wait for me to go back and ask carefully to see who is so unruly. Director Zhou said, if you are willing to ask, then it is best. However, in fact, smoking soil, even in the capital, is now half banned and half unstoppable. If you really want to ban it, how can you stop it? Are those who are addicted to smoking say no and stop smoking? There are several big smokehouses. It can be regarded as opening the door to do legitimate business, and they didn't force people to smoke big cigarettes, right? It's better than the dark dens in the dark alleys. Those black dens are often shoddy and eat a lot of people to death. The big cigarette halls are easy to control. Second, no matter what, they also pay you a lot of taxes, don't they? You still deserve credit for the country. Bai Xuelan nodded. That makes sense. Director Zhou was very satisfied and said, you can hear these words in your ears, so even if I didn't say it for nothing. Come, let's eat. The two ate a few chopsticks, and Director Zhou asked again, then what do you think now? How can I deal with it? Bai Xuelan slowly chewed and swallowed a piece of venison, and smiled slightly. With my brother's enlightenment, can I still be enlightened? It's easy. The big smoke hall. I won't close it in the future, even if I really want to close it. I'll also say hello to you first, lest the customs and the police department fight instead. Isn't this the flood that swept the Dragon King Temple, and my family doesn't recognize my family? Director Zhou said, extremely, extremely. Yes. Bai Xuelan added, however, smoking soil is a business that makes a lot of money. I can't be perfunctory in this regard. They still have to pay the taxes that should be paid. As for those people who like to smoke or not, I don't bother to care. Director Zhou said, of course, the tax is not much to you. If they dare to default, without your opening, my police department will destroy their place first. Bai Xuelan smiled and said, I will rely on my brother in the future. Director Zhou's shiny face also burst into a smile, and he coughed loudly. The room door opened immediately. In fact, Zhou Huo stayed in the room next door for a long time. He listened to the two of them against the wooden partition. He found that Director Zhou gave a secret signal and brought two burly men who came to this room. When he saw Bai Xuelan, appearing very calm, he smiled and cupped his hands. Chief Pai. We finally meet. He raised his head and raised his chin. A big man in the back held a sandalwood box, put it on the table in front of Bai Xuelan, lifted the lid of the box, and walked back to Zhou Huo silently. Bai Xuelan looked at the sandalwood box, reached out and turned it over. On the top is a thin check with the amount of 500,000 written on it. When the check is opened, there is a half box of pearls, each of which is the size of a pinky finger, and the pearls are white and shiny. Most of the emerald green was buried in pearls, revealing only the head of a horse carved with the spirit of a divine horse. It was the emerald horse that Bai Xuelan refused to accept last time. Bai Xuelan poked at the pearl thoughtfully, raised his eyelids, and asked, "Boss Zhou, I don't quite understand how you gave such a big gift." Zhou Huo smiled hilariously. "Chief Bai, we two a while ago. I don't know each other. And there are quite a few misunderstandings between them. These greetings will relieve the anger of Chief Bai. If we become friends in the future, we will naturally have long-term contacts." Director Zhou patted Bai Xuelan on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Brother Bai, Lao Zhou is a man with a bold temperament and a generous hand. You will slowly get along and you will know it naturally." Bai Xuelan said, "If I take such a valuable thing, I don't know what kind of favor I will give back." Zhou Hao said with a smile, "What kind of favor do you need to be friends? As long as you clear up your previous misunderstandings and stop misunderstanding each other, that's a great thing." Zhou Huo said, "That's right." Director Zhou told Bai Xuelan again and said, "You are the chief of customs, and Lao Zhou is a serious businessman. Although he runs a big smoke shop, he is also a good citizen. The two should cooperate with the government and businessmen to contribute to the country." "Do you think so?" With Bai Xuelan expressing his position, Zhou Huo stood with his back to the door, connected to the two big men behind him, and 3 pairs of eyes were fixed on Bai Xuelan's face. However, Bai Xuelan fiddled with the pearls in the box very leisurely, as if he was considering something, and after a while, he raised his head, looked at Zhou Huo, and said lightly, "Since we want to clear up the past, we have to first let's talk about those old hatreds. Boss Zhou, the rift between you and me seems to be more than just shutting down a few of your big smokehouses. Right? You have probably done a lot of good things to me." Zhou Huo said calmly, "Chief Bai, I know what you are going to say. Those 3 bastards who were caught said that I ordered them to be nonsense. I fucked his ancestors. But, to be honest, if we had paid my friend, you won't be in such a bad situation." Director Zhou hurriedly said, "Hey, Brother Zhou. Be careful when you speak, Chief Bai is a gentleman." Zhou Huo snorted from his nose, gave a thumbs up, pointed to his chest, and said sharply, "There are hundreds of brothers in this city who eat with me. My friend, first touch his own neck if the knife is hard enough. Chief Bai, as long as we become friends, don't talk about your safety in the future, it's the safety of your customs staff, you can rest assured." Bai Xuelan said, "Oh? So, if I don't make you a friend, I can't rest assured for the safety of my members and me in the future?" Zhou Huo smiled and said, It's hard to say." Zhou Huo deliberately said to Director Zhou sternly, "Old Zhou, don't make fun of this kind of thing. Brother Bai has just been ambushed by someone, so he can't make a joke. You are a friend, just make friends, so why bother?" "Safety?" Bai Xuelan said to Director Zhou, "Brother Zhou, it's okay, I'm not such a timid person." Turning his head, looking at Zhou Huo again, he said slowly, "Boss Zhou, say to get up. I admire you the most." Zhou Huo asked, "What do you admire about me?" Bai Xuelan said, "Since you know that the 3 prisoners identified you as an instigator, how dare you come here to meet me?" Zhou Huo said, "Those 3 prisoners are false accusations. The police department has investigated them clearly. Didn't they kill them long ago? I'm not guilty of talking nonsense for a few bastards, so I lie in the nest and dare not come out. Bai Xuelan's voice spit out 2 words, really? He had listened to Bai Xuelan's words next door. And there was a lot of regret in it. He thought that as long as he came over, gave him a gift, and said a few scenes, this Liu Yang the soft egg will naturally go with the flow. Knock a stick and give a candy. Although this strategy is a bit rough, it works very well for officials. Unexpectedly, the 500,000 check was sent with a box of emerald pearls. But Bai Xuelan didn't hum, let alone express his position. Not even a word of truth. Like an old piece of rubber that couldn't be chewed and swallowed, so suffocated. Zhou Huo was secretly annoyed. Thinking that he had to say something ruthless, he suppressed the surnamed Pai, raised his thick eyebrows, and laughed. Chief Pai, the surnamed Zhou is here to make friends today with sincerity. If you dislike it, I don't want to make this friend with the surname Zhou. It's okay, you give me a word, and I'll leave immediately. Bai Xuelan said. You are suspected of instigating the gangsters to murder the chief of customs. Do you think you can leave easily? Zhou Huo's face sank suddenly. What? You still want to arrest me? Bai Xuelan smiled and said, but it's hard to say. Zhou Huo snorted, and the 2 big men behind him quietly put their hands into their coats. The waist of the jacket bulged slightly outwards, and looking at the shape, you knew it was a gun without asking. Director Zhou's expression changed slightly, and he frowned. Brother Pai. The police department has already closed this case. You can't arrest anyone without any evidence. Bai Xuelan smiled, said nothing, and looked away stare at Zhou Huo. Zhou Huo glanced at Bai Xuelan and the 2 guards behind him, and laughed loudly. Okay. A little courageous. His face sank suddenly. He took out his pistol, slammed it on the table, glared at Bai Xuelan and said, Chief Pai, the surnamed Zhou has been on the road for decades, so it's not bluffing. Today in the Jinghua building, several rooms are connected to the hall below, and there are hundreds of brothers of mine, and everyone has a self-defense guy on them. Now, based on the false accusations of the 3 dead men, you want to take me away from their eyes. First ask my brother if he will answer. Director Zhou stood up and roared, Old Zhou. Don't be ridiculous. Come on. What are you doing with your gun drawn? Are you making friends or making a mess? Rough man. He turned around and persuaded Bai Xuelan, Brother Pai. You are too arrogant, there is something unpleasant, talk about it happily. That's fine, not to mention I've already guaranteed you. Old Zhou has absolutely no involvement in the ambush. He came to be your friend with sincerity. If you're like this, it's possible that even our police department doesn't trust us, right? Zhou Huo said coldly, since Chief Pai looks down on us. We are not forced to be friends. Brothers, let's go. Put on a U-turn is about to go out of the formation. Bai Xuelan watched one of them sing White Face, one sang Black Face, one gave gifts. And the other talked about friendship. Boss Zhou, you are a man, but you just lack patience. Since all the gifts have been delivered, why rush to leave? We should have a drink. Right? To be gratified, he smiled and said, exactly, always have a drink. No, you have to drink 3 glasses in a row to be happy. He held the pot and poured 3 glasses of wine. Zhou Huo came here this time to bring Bai Xuelan to his side. Seeing that Bai Xuelan was somewhat stunned, of course he went down the steps, first came over and brought a cup, and greeted Bai Xuelan across the table. He gave a respect and said, Chief Pai, I haven't read any books, and I've collided with you, don't take it to heart. But I've always been a knife to my friends. After drinking this cup, we're our own people. In the future, whenever you want money or someone, I can talk to your brother. There is nothing I can't do. He raised his head and did it. With this arrogance, Director Zhou couldn't help but sighed. Okay, you have the courage. After tisk tisk, he turned his head and said to Bai Xuelan, Brother Zhou, old hatred is obsolete. Such a man is worth talking to. Do you? Bai Xuelan nodded. Indeed, it's worth paying. With a smile, he put the full wine glass on the table gently, and with a hand on his body, he took out a pistol like lightning and pulled the trigger. There was a loud bang in the room, and a blood hole appeared between Zhou Huo's eyebrows, and he fell straight back with a look of disbelief. The two big men behind him were shocked by the sound of the gunfire. Just as they were about to draw their guns, the two behind Bai Xuelan were already prepared. One shot one by one, bang. Boom. Twice, they were also sent to see Zhou Huo. As soon as the gunshots rang out, there was movement in the surrounding rooms and below. Song Ren had a murderous look on his face, and said in a low voice, Chief, I'll go out and take care of it. He left the room with the gun in his hand. The sound of gunshots suddenly sounded outside, and the sound of gunfire was endless. It turned out that Bai Xuelan had secretly sent someone to surround the Jinghua building, intending to ambush Zhou Huo. This hand was flowing, but within a few seconds, Zhou Huo splattered blood into the room and turned into a corpse. Director Zhou suddenly did not know what happened. His face was pale, and when Song Ren went out, he raised his head and went straight, looking at Bai Xuelan. Brother Bai. Bai Xuelan sat idle, and then went to play with the pearls in the sandalwood box like glass balls, and smiled indifferently. Brother Zhou. Our customs and police department working together to lure this heinous gangster out of the cave and save the people is a great achievement. Director Zhou looked at his smile at this moment. As if he had seen the wicked smile of the King of Hell, his back was straight and hairy. Looking at the three corpses on the ground, he said with trembling lips, but their charges. Bai Xuelan smiled lightly. The most common charges are selling tobacco soil, tempting people to smoke, and smuggling for huge profits. Well, there is also attempted murder to Commissioner of Customs. I'm not talking about the last time, but today, in front of me, he even pulled out his gun, and it's not evidence of a crime. Brother Zhou, you saw it with your own eyes, so you have to testify for me. Knowing what real lawlessness is, being bold and ruthless, Bai Xuelan's trigger is pulled as soon as it is pulled. If it doesn't follow his wishes, he may be killed here, and he will be able to kill the police at that time. The director's charge fell on Zhou Huo. In this situation, how dare to go against Bai Xuelan's words, take out a handkerchief to wipe the sweat, and at the same time insist, yes, yes. I saw him draw a gun with my own eyes. Bai Xuelan smiled. I know that my brother is law enforcement impartially. He winked at the guard behind him. The guard immediately took out a document, put it on the table, and put a pen beside it. Bai Xuelan said kindly, this is a testimony. Please sign your name, Brother Zhou. Director Zhou looked at it, and it turned out to be in the format of a regular police department witness. It was written in black and white that Zhou Huo attempted to murder the chief of customs in Jinghua building. Clearly, everything was planned by Bai Xuelan long ago. At least Bai Xuelan had already made up his mind before he came out to eat from the General Administration of Customs. So, I had no choice but to sign my name. Bai Xuelan put away the documents and reassured him, you don't have to be unhappy, Brother Zhou. How can you care about the minorities when you do things for the country? Besides, Zhou Huo has caused a lot of trouble for the police department over the years. Brother Zhou, you don't have to wipe his butt all the time. This guy must have made a lot of money from selling tobacco and soil. If we check his family property later, wouldn't the police department have an extra income? Even if we can't find the stolen goods, it's those big cigarettes. In the hall, the house can also be exchanged for money, right? I, Bai Xuelan, have actually done my brother a big favor. Director Zhou said, yes, what you said is not unreasonable. He sighed. Outside the wing, the Jinghua building was like a New Year's Eve. The sound of gunfire was continuous, and the screams of people before they were dying kept ringing, which made people tremble with fear. However, Bai Xuelan was more entertained than listening to the play, and said with a smile, cut the grass and remove the roots, which is very pleasing. It's a pity that Zhou Huo only brought more than 100 people, even more enjoyable. Come on, brother Zhou. Let's eat. He picked up a piece of venison with chopsticks and was about to put it in his mouth. Suddenly, Song Ren's roar came from outside. Adjutant Zhan is injured. Bai Xuelan was stunned for a moment, and the chopsticks fell to the ground with a snap of the venison.